So at the time of recording this video, it's been a little bit over a year since I posted and purchased this Steam Deck here. And this little device has honestly been incredible for the channel. I mean, the amount of views that I've gotten from doing gameplay videos to like tutorials on the Steam Deck have been absolutely incredible. A lot of new faces here, so thank you guys so much for sticking around. But channel aside, it's been a year since I've used the Steam Deck, and a lot has changed in the past, year. There's been a lot of new competition. You got MSI, Asus, and Lenovo all joining the fray. You got Aya Neo really trying to push as well, the Air, trying to get it into the mainstream market. Like, I literally went across an Aya Neo in a micro center. I've never seen that before from Aya Neo before. So yeah, it's very interesting to see. I mean, the Steam Deck has really propelled this industry, this piece in the industry forward. And I kind of want to give my thoughts on the Steam Deck a year later of using it, what I think about it, if anything really has changed about my opinions, and just gonna talk about what I think about it a year later. So yeah, spoiler alert, not much has changed. I still absolutely love this thing, and to be honest with you, even after a year, even after with all the competition aside, I think the Steam Deck has so much good still compared to any other device that I've seen, that I still think that it's by far the most versatile handheld compared to like literally even other PC handhelds. So let me get into it. So first off, let's talk about the comfortability. At least compared to the ROG Ally and some of the newer handhelds, I still think the Deck is by far the most comfortable handheld I've used. I mean, the controller placements are basically perfect for this kind of size. The grips are big enough to be very easy and very nice to wrap around, even with smaller hands. And it just feels really nice to play for hours on end. Now, I do wish this thing had a smaller footprint like the ROG Ally, like a slightly smaller footprint and a little bit lighter, but this thing I will thoroughly enjoy for playing for hours just because of how comfortable it is just playing games on it. Like, I don't think anything I've used before has just been this comfortable before. And like, especially to like stuff like the Switch here, where you have to basically buy external grips like this just to make it feel comfortable for long hours of handheld play. With the Steam Deck, you don't even need like this grip case that I have. You can literally just use the Steam Deck on its own, and it feels really good to use. So yeah. Next up, I do want to talk about the controls. Speaking on the controls that I was talking about earlier, the amount of control options you have here is something I don't think I've ever seen in any device, PC handheld, and even like any PC handheld that has released afterwards. I mean, this thing has almost everything, basically. You have two trackpads. I don't think any other PC handheld device has two trackpads, which is great because not only can you use this thing for like D-pad stuff or like mouse input, but you can also use it to basically map like 4 extra macros per D-pad. So basically you have like 8 to 10 extra macros just from these trackpads alone, which is incredible. I don't think any device since this thing has released has even come close to the flexibility of like the trackpads. You also have 4, macro back buttons here, 4 like back buttons here. Most Steam Deck or most PC handhelds I've seen nowadays only come with 2, so having those extra 2 is pretty good. You also have an accelerometer, which is really nice, and you have a dedicated button for your main menu and your quick access menu. I can't speak today, but yeah. I mean, the amount of control options you have on this thing, especially compared to the new PC handhelds that came around the block, is astounding. And I'm not sure why these other handhelds have not really grasped on, like, for example, the touchpads, the dual touchpads, and say like the extra buttons. I mean, the amount of flexibility you have on the Steam Deck is astounding, and you can basically map the controls to basically however you want to adapt any control scheme you want, which is incredible. This is something I really think that other devices don't do best, and I think others can really improve from Valve. All right, next up, I think this is a pretty big one, SteamOS. SteamOS has just gotten better and better over the years, and it's honestly been incredible. I mean, so right now I have the LCD deck, which technically has less color accuracy and less vibrant colors than the newly released OLED deck, which is awesome to see them make an OLED deck. But in a recent update, they basically allowed LCD decks you can basically adjust the colors to make it a little bit more saturated if you really wanted to. And this thing, these settings have basically made my Steam Deck display look way more vibrant than I think I've ever seen before. And the fact that they're able to do this with just software is just incredible to me. The amount of support that Valve has put into SteamOS is just great. I mean, SteamOS is just so easy to use for a PC. The entire UI is just so natural for a controller. You can easily, navigate through the menu here. It reminds me a lot of the Xbox UI here. So yeah, I mean, super easy to navigate. Just click on a game, right, that you want to play. Let's say I want to play, Sonic Colors, right? Just play that. Boom, there you go. You're into the game. And if you wanna, you have your quick access menu, kind of like an Xbox menu here. It honestly, like, I have to give Valve big props. The way they engineered the Steam user interface for controller for this kind of handheld kind of play is something that Windows cannot replicate. And I really hope in the future that more PC handhelds adapt SteamOS, because this user interface is just incredible. All right, while we're on Sonic Colors here, I think this is a perfect game to really introduce my next point, which is low TDP Steam Deck performance. This thing on lower watts, like anything under 15 watts, the game performance is just incredible. Especially with the battery savings, the battery life savings you get from lower TDPs, is just great. So let's just launch into a mode here. So one thing I do love about SteamOS is the ability to basically tinker performance here, just to like whatever you want to. So here, I have a specific profile to have for Sonic Colors here. I have a TDP limit set to, let's say, 10 watts. So even at 10 watts, I mean, this game runs absolutely flawlessly on the Steam Deck. Okay, it took a little bit to load in because the SD cards and hard drives are a little slow, but after the stutters go away, it's flawless, honestly. There may be a little bit of stutters, but nothing really to deter the experience that much. So really, really good performance here from the Steam Deck on those lower watt TDPs, and especially for those like smaller games that don't require a lot of graphical power to run. This thing is just incredible for those lower TDPs, and the lower TDPs really make it incredible for battery life too. I know I mentioned battery life before, but obviously with lower power usages, you get increasingly better battery life. And something that Windows can't really replicate is the fact that the those handhelds usually have to rely on higher TDPs to run the games. With the Steam Deck, its strong point here is being able to play lower, like less demanding games with exceptional battery life because of the low TDP performance. Because essentially, like the Windows handhelds, like those, for some reason, those specific handhelds, their battery life or their performance on lower wattages, like anything under 15, is just so subpar compared to what Valve has done here on the Steam Deck, that I honestly don't understand why it's so bad. Like this is something like this performance I would never get on, let's say, like the ROG Ally at like 8 to 10 watts like I have here. It's so interesting to me how Valve has been able to do this. So to show another example, I decided to pull up Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. This is not a relatively intensive title, but it did release in the past couple years, and it's a lot of fun to play, honestly. Now on the Steam Deck, you can see here that it's running flawlessly, like 60 FPS mainly for like most of the game. And here I pull up my power settings, and you can see there 7 watts. 7 watts is pretty damn impressive for 60 FPS gameplay on this game. Now, this isn't running at the highest settings, but still, this type of performance to efficiency is something I only really see in, say, like Apple Silicon Macs. Very impressive. Now, that's all said and good, but I do want to mention a couple of things that I still don't really like about the Steam Deck, but it's not because of the Steam Deck itself. It's just because of these newer PC handhelds have introduced features that I would like to add them in a future iteration. I do want to talk about a major feature that I covered on the ROG Ally that I would love to see in the Steam Deck in the future, and that is variable refresh rate. Especially with the power of the Steam Deck being weaker than say the Z1 Extreme in the Ally, having a variable refresh rate with how much the FPS fluctuates on the deck would be incredible, because it basically removes all the stutteriness that the Steam Deck kind of suffers with more demanding games that require more graphical power. So yeah, I mean, that's not something on Valve, and I'm pretty sure that was not something that was on Valve's mind when they initially made the Steam Deck. But if they could add that in the future, that would be really awesome too. And speaking of the Z1 Extreme, the performance on 15 plus watts on this is subpar. I mean, compared to the ROG Ally and like the Legion Go as an example, the ROG Ally and Legion Go just absolutely crushed the Steam Deck when it comes to performance on those more demanding games. I wish the Steam Deck was just a slightly bit more powerful in that aspect, and that's only because you have an entire wave of really unexplained but demanding AAA titles, stuff like Avatar, Alan Wake 2. I mean, I could go on and on with the list of modern AAA games that have just been really crappy for performance on the handhelds. And for those who really want a handheld experience, the Steam Deck really isn't going to cut it that much, especially compared to those other handhelds in terms of performance. So yeah, it's really up to the developers to make sure that their games really support well or run well on these handhelds. So it's not honestly all of Valve's fault, but it's something that I do want to mention because it's something that you have to deal with if you do plan to get a Steam Deck to play AAA games. And I guess on the topic of running game compatibility, all of these games that run on Steam basically were designed with Windows in mind. They were compiled for Windows. And when it comes to game compatibility, a lot of times you have to go through compatibility layers with Linux, since this is a Linux-based machine. So sometimes games will just not work, either because the anti-cheat doesn't work with the compatibility layer, or they just, they have some issues with running and you have to go through a bunch of tools just to run it. With Windows handhelds, one thing that they do absolutely better is that the games just work out of the box. And it's so funny to mention that because Windows isn't really considered to be a console-like experience to begin with, but one thing they do good is that literally like for every game basically boots out of the box for the most part. And that's something I can't really say for the Steam Deck and SteamOS in its current state, because you still got a good chunk of games that just simply will not run on this game. Well, not run on, not the game, but this device, because of the incompatibilities with the compatibility layer. Hopefully more developers get on board to compile and get more support on SteamOS, but we'll see how that goes in the future. Also, one thing I wish too that this thing had was Game Pass. I think it would be awesome if this thing also supported Xbox Game Pass games, like downloading them locally, because I have hundreds of Game Pass games that I do want to play, but I cannot play on the Steam Deck here because this thing doesn't natively support Xbox Game Pass. I would need to basically install Windows on that. And at that point, if I do want to install Windows on this thing, I'd better just go get a ROG Ally or something else like that, because those are better Windows machines, if that makes sense. So, all right, let's go ahead and wrap everything up in a really nice little bow tie here. Just kind of express my thoughts on the Steam Deck a year later. Now, if I could give in the terms of how much I use this thing, it would be a lot. I mean, out of all of my handheld or portable devices I own, this thing has essentially become the de facto device that I always bring. It's something that I always bring, for example, during my lunch breaks at work, on long family road trips, or even just simply, just sitting in bed and just, I want to play a quick round of Power World or something like that in bed. I always use this device. I don't use any other handheld device in my arsenal. Especially for non-Windows use, this thing is essentially like the ultimate budget handheld console PC hybrid, especially with all the software updates. With how committed Valve is to this device, I cannot recommend it enough for those who don't mind the performance woes, or if you don't play any games that rely on Windows. This thing just does it all. It's almost perfect in my eyes, and I don't regret it a year later. This is probably my favorite purchase I made in the past year, and absolutely no regrets. Valve did an absolutely stellar job, and I will not stop singing their praises because what they've done here is incredible. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. That I just want to give my thoughts on the Steam Deck of 1 year later. And yeah, be on the lookout for a future video. Speaking of Xbox, catch you guys in the next one. Later.